So this is it. This is the rower Peloton has been working on for the past 3 or so years. It's finally here and it's called the Peloton Row. Now, writing this review was really hard because every time I thought I had covered it all, I would remember something else and then I would remember something else and on because the Peloton Row has so many unique features both within the design of the hardware but also with the software running it. And many of these are things I have not seen on any rower ever within the 15 years I've been rowing. Now, some of these are small things like a bottle holder within the rower frame or a handle underneath the rower to make storing it upright way easier and more controlled. And some things are pretty big, like how silent they've been able to make this rower. It's whisper quiet, and I mean whisper quiet, and that's never been done before. Sensors for real-time form tracking and analysis. That has also never been done before on a rower. You know, I've never actually been super impressed with Peloton's hardware. I mean, I've always thought it was very good and well designed, but not truly impressed as the content has always outshined the equipment. But with the Peloton Row, that's simply not the case. In this case, I actually think that the equipment outshines the content. And yes, we'll dig into the content here as well. I believe the Peloton Row is the best piece of equipment they have ever produced. It's almost perfect. It does have a few flaws and there are a few questionable decisions that were made here, and at almost $3,200, I still cannot recommend it for anybody except for the most diehard of Peloton fans, but the Peloton Row is special. So let's dig into it. Now, for those of you new to the channel, this is Colin with Connect the Watts, where we cover the latest in connected fitness tech. So if you like that and want to stay up to date with the latest, make sure to hit that subscribe button before you go. Okay, so I was actually misled about the size of the Peloton Row because according to the manual, it is 7 feet 10 inches, which already makes it by far the longest rower I have ever seen. But when I actually was able to measure it, it's actually longer than that at a full 8 feet. So this is something you will definitely have to consider if you have a smaller floor space, or if you want to be able to store it upright, you'll need to make sure that your ceiling is over 8 feet. Now, to store the Peloton Row, there's a little button underneath the screen that allows you to collapse it down and make it more compact. And storing an 8-foot rower upright can be tough, especially if you're on the short side. So thankfully, the super smart folks at Peloton put this handle about halfway down to make it a lot easier. And it actually does make it significantly easier to store upright and easier to control. And this handle is also there for you to be able to attach the tether and carabiner with the wall mount that comes with the Peloton Row to ensure that it doesn't fall over. It's actually pretty steady in that upright position even without the tether, but the tether is there really more for safety, just in case you really fall into it hard or something. Because if you have this 8-foot 150-pound rower fall on you and then the USCPSC gets involved and asks Peloton to recall it like the Peloton Tread Plus, well, nobody wants that, thus the included wall mount and tether. The Peloton Row also has 2 wheels in the front, as most do, so you can easily wheel it around as you need to. And you can actually even open up this little latch here to unbolt the long rail from the front, which could possibly be necessary for something this long if you live in a small space and need to change its location to another room. Now, for those of you who have a sensitive butt, you are in luck because you're going to really like this very soft and squishy seat that comes with the Peloton Row. It's very similar to the Hydros and feels super comfortable to sit on. The seat sits on a rail where it will glide back and forth as you row, and this is very smooth and shockingly very quiet. Now, seats on a rower don't tend to make a lot of noise, but they usually make more noise than this. Now, the seat is placed fairly low, especially relative to the foot pads. Now, this isn't a problem for me, and I actually like how this positioning feels just fine, but I want to note it because if you are a larger or less flexible person, like you can't really touch your toes, then this seat to foot pad height ratio is going to make it a little tougher for you to be able to get into a good position without rounding your back. Now, the foot strap here on the foot pad is great. I really like how they designed it with a wide surface area that really makes it easy to tighten and keep a snug fit. But in here, and this is one of the more questionable decisions, the foot pad seems poorly built for somebody with smaller feet. There are 7 levels to the foot pad, with the smaller numbers being for the smaller footed individuals. Now, I wear a 9.5 size shoe, and the optimal foot pad level for me was the number 2, and it only goes down to 1. fun. Now, you will still probably be fine if it's off by a few, and if you aren't somebody who has rowed for a long time, you may not even notice, but it does seem strange to me to have a foot pad that is not designed well for a woman. Now here next to the foot pads, we have a bottle holder and an additional holder for like headphones or a sweat towel or anything you want, and this is great as I've never seen this before on a rower, and I don't know why. It's nice. Next, we have the handle, and it's a very similar handle to like the classic Concept 2 with a similar shape and a hard plastic feel. Unfortunately, it doesn't feel nearly as comfortable as some other handles, and for some reason there's these 2 holes in the back which really bugged me while I rode. I mean, it's not a bad handle by any means, but when everything else is so good, the handle is one of the more noticeable weak areas for the Peloton Row. Then we have the 24-inch HD touchscreen. Now this is pretty much the exact same screen that you'll see on the Peloton Bike Plus or the Peloton Tread. And just like those, this looks great, is quick and responsive, and has a very nice set of forward-facing speakers, which are some of the best for any connected fitness device. The screen can also rotate 25 degrees up or down, as well as 45 degrees to the left and right, which of course is going to be useful for taking classes off of the rower like strength, yoga, and what Peloton is really going to be leaning into here, the boot camp classes, which take you both on and off the rower. Now, the big question is, how does it feel to row on? Well, when I first jumped on it and started to row, I was actually shocked about how horrible it felt. It felt like there would be no resistance and all of a sudden a lot of resistance, and it was very jarring and not smooth at all. And I was thinking, oh my God, is this really what they built? But then thanks to the nice Peloton showroom workers, and I'll talk more about them later because they were awesome, but then they showed me that I needed to calibrate the row first. And I've never seen a rower be calibrated exactly like this before, but once I followed along to the prompts to have Peloton know where my finish position is and where my catch position is, the rower then turned from jarring to ultra smooth, and I found that very fascinating. And so yes, the Peloton Row feels very good to row on, and I would say on par to the same feeling as the Hydro. But here's the one difference. It doesn't make any noise. Now, I know a lot of rowers claim to not make very much noise, and while most of them are not as loud as the chainsaw that is the Concept 2, they all make some noise. It may not be super loud, but it's definitely noticeable. The Peloton Row is not like that. It's so quiet that I actually did a double take. Like, am I just not hearing the noise? It was just such a strange feeling for me to row and there to be just nothing. No noise. I mean, you can hear a little bit of the nylon strap winding back and forth, but that's about it. Otherwise, just nothing. Okay, so now let's talk about the content and the form tracking and all of the cool features and things that you'll actually be looking at while you row. So when selecting a class, you have a few options. You can choose Just Row, which is pretty much just a blank screen where you can see your metrics. And this is the only thing you will be staring at should you ever cancel your Peloton membership, so just a heads up. Then there are scenic rides, and Peloton only has one right now, but given their other content for the bike and tread, I would expect to see about a dozen or so available here upon the launch of the Peloton Row in December. This seems fine. It's pretty much just a drone shot going across the water. I prefer more like Hydros and other companies which actually use a camera on a rower itself, but to be fair, I don't usually take scenic rides anyways, so maybe others prefer this more floaty drone style. And then we have the classes, which I was surprised Peloton actually had as many available classes as they did, with the launch being over 2 months away still. But I was very happy to see it, as it allowed me to get a really good sense of what the content will be like. And so just like the tread and the bike, the Peloton content comes with warm-ups and various types of workouts, both as short as 5 to 10 minutes and one even as long as 45 minutes. Now, when you start a rowing class, you'll be presented with 2 new options, one being your drag factor or resistance setting, and the other being your pace target. The drag is automatically set to medium or standard level, and you are suggested not to change it until you've been rowing for a bit, and this is a very good suggestion. If you are new to rowing, it can be a bit hard to understand at first that you don't actually want your resistance levels changing during your workout. resistance on the rower is instead generated by your own power. So the harder and faster you drive with your legs and pull the handle, the more resistance you're going to get. So it's best to think of drag less as resistance, but more of like if you were actually rowing, how muddy you want that water to feel. And so for most, you'll probably just leave the drag at this standard setting and probably never ever move it. Over time, you can experiment with the slightly higher or lower levels if you want to see if you have more of a preference. Now I tested the drag on all of these main settings as well as brought it all the way to 0 and the max level 230. And yeah, I wouldn't ever suggest going to those. Actually, never mind. Definitely try them at some point to have a really crazy, strange workout experience, but in general, probably not a good idea. Now, the pace target is something else that is brand new to Peloton. So instead of you following along to the instructor who would traditionally say to use a specific range of resistance or a specific speed, now the instructors use the terms easy, moderate, hard, and so on to let you know which pace you should be aiming for. And depending on the pace target level you selected, those ranges will all be very different. Now, in theory, I like this as it provides a much more customized training experience for each workout. In practice, though, I feel like it needs a bit more fine-tuning. Many of the levels just seem to have really big gaps between them that I found myself often wanting to be right in between two and didn't find really either adequate to the exact range I wanted to stick with. Now, it's not required to follow these ranges as they are just suggestions, but still, I would like to see a few more levels, especially between levels 4 and 7, to be added. Or even better, just provide power zone training, which would be ideal, and other rowing platforms do it, so the implementation would be easy, especially with Matt Wilpers already there to put it all together. Unfortunately, and we'll talk about this a bit more, but with only 5 coaches, I think Peloton is going to be a little limited in their options here, and similar to the tread, I very much doubt we're going to be seeing power zone added anytime soon. Now, once you start a class, you'll see on the screen your pace measured in time per 500 meters, your stroke rate, and in the middle, your total output, which is the number Peloton uses to help assess your performance and compete on the leaderboard. Among these metrics is a new wave icon, and I forgot what it was called, but it's a very strange addition. What it does is it sort of adds this blue wave that rises up alongside your rowing motion, evidently to help you get a better sense of your rowing rhythm. I didn't find it particularly useful, but I also don't think it looks bad, so I just left it on for the most part. Another interesting change here is that during a workout, whenever there is a form drill, usually towards the warm-ups and the cool-downs, but sometimes in the middle of the workouts, the metrics would sort of gray out, and although you can still see your pace and calories continue to climb, your total meters rowed and power output is no longer recorded during those sections, which is kind of cool because you feel much more inclined to focus on the drill rather than to keep just rowing and try to set a new record or be number 1 on the leaderboard. I think this would be great if they added this to some sections of the bike and the tread as well. Another thing I found interesting was that the notification for high fives has been moved to the lower right side, which I actually found pretty easy to use while rowing and high five back. In fact, I found the interaction with the screen to be much easier than I had anticipated. Since with rowing, you're required to have 2 hands on the handle, I figured it was going to be really tough, but since your hands get so close to the screen in the catch, I found it pretty easy to just extend my finger and give somebody a high five or favorite a song. In fact, it's a lot more easy than the Peloton tread because trying to give somebody a high five while you're running, well, that's a skill that you have to acquire. Now, the final big feature that we need to discuss here is the new form feedback and form tracking. So how this works, and I'm still trying to figure out exactly how it works, but how I believe it works is through sensors that are located both in the handle and the seat holder to let the Peloton Row know exactly where those 2 pieces are located at all times. And it uses that information in addition to the information the Peloton Row knows about your finish and catch positions from the calibration to be able to monitor your form in real time. And it's actually pretty impressive. It tracked my positioning extremely well, even being able to detect the difference between me pulling the handle with my arms or just leaning back. And it uses that information to watch for various form faults, such as leaning back too far or too little, or not leaning forward before returning, or bending your knees too early before the handle is in the correct position, and so on, with a total of 9 form faults that it is programmed to look for. Now, during a workout, this will show up as red spots in your avatar in the location that you are having an error with, which, by the way, Peloton, as somebody who's a little bit colorblind, this is extremely difficult to see, so please add a colorblind mode. And at the end of each class is a full breakdown of all of your faults and the percentage of your total strokes that you committed each of these faults. It's a very good and easy representation of what you should try and work on. And I thought this was really cool. Now, I have a feeling most people, including myself, during a lot of the classes will probably turn that real-time monitoring off because it can be annoying and a little bit stressful to always be corrected every single stroke. But the post-workout analysis, that is something that I will always take a look at, and I am very excited to try and improve those numbers. And as I mentioned, there are currently 5 rowing coaches that will be making content for the Peloton Row, 2 of which Peloton owners will likely know well, Matt Wilpers and Adrian Williams. And then there are 3 new coaches, Ash Pryor, Alex Karwoski, and Katie Wang. Now, Matt and Adrian are 2 of my personal favorite Peloton coaches, and I respect them both a ton, but I do have to say that they are not actually the best coaches here. You can sort of tell that Matt doesn't have nearly the experience of rowing as he does with running or biking, so he's not in his best environment, at least yet. And Adrian is really there more for that motivational factor and energy he brings, and most likely to do a lot of really tough boot camps, which will be a highlight for many. The new coach, Katie Wang, is sort of similar in a sense to Adrian, having a more strength and boot camp style background, but it is the other 2 new coaches which bring the most expertise and solid coaching to the Peloton Row. And from my experience so far, Ash Pryor is going to be a huge highlight here, as I found her coaching to be extremely good, and I believe she has the potential to be one of the best Peloton coaches. So I was very, very impressed with her. And Alex, he's very good as well, and he seems sort of familiar. Oh yeah, I've taken a ton of classes with his brother Nick, who is a coach on the Hydro. Now that sounds like a very fun family rivalry. Now, of course, this is all very early. The Peloton Row still has over 2 months until it starts to be shipped out. So of course, there may be changes to some of the software, but my guess is that this is a pretty good picture of what you can expect. So is the Peloton Row perfect? No, but it's as close as I've ever seen. Is it worth the $3,200 price? Most certainly not. And I would not suggest it to anybody besides the most dedicated Peloton members until that price is lower. And if you're interested in it, I would highly suggest visiting a Peloton showroom to try it out. Although I know that can be hard because many people don't live near showrooms, and out of the 6 that I called, only 1 actually had it. But if you can, I would highly suggest it. And if you are somebody who is going to buy or pre-order the Peloton Row, one request that I have from you is to order it from a Peloton showroom. And if you can't go to one, order one from a showroom on the phone so that they get credit and commission. And most importantly, let Peloton know that these stores are worth keeping. Now, if you want to see how the Peloton Row compares to the rest, I have a huge comparison video in the works, which includes pretty much every single rower, but also one that has not been released or even announced yet. So make sure to subscribe so you don't miss that. And thanks so much for being here. I know this was a long one. Appreciate it. And as always, I'll see you next time.